Good morning and thank you. Thank you for inviting me. For some months now, from the moment that I received the invitation to come to give a speech here, I learned a little, just a little, about MIFF, your organization. And let me tell you that I admire you, because I think that it's not you that have to thank me. I have to thank you. Because it's very easy, from my point of view as an Israeli, to fight against lies, and we are going to deal with it. I'm going to deal with it in my lecture. But from your point of view, it's not easy. And you are fighting with your love, with your passion, with all of what you are doing. And some people here that I already met are doing a great job. Not for Israel, by the way, for the truth. I'm not talking from a political point of view. I'm talking about lies and truth. And that's all what I'm going to talk about today. So I really have to thank you for your readiness to listen, to know, to hear, and to fight for the truth. Some words about myself before I begin my presentation. For many years, I've been a member in what you might call the peace camp in Israel. I want peace. I did not change my views, by the way. I did not change my views. 20 years ago, in 1992, before the Oslo agreements, before the Oslo process, I went all the way to Tunisia to meet Yasser Arafat as an Israeli, a journalist. And I wanted to find out, why don't we have peace? I met him as part of a big process. And when the Oslo Accords were realized, I was a big supporter, because I do believe in peace. I don't want any kind of oppression. I want all people in the Middle East to live in peace. I believe it. And of course, during the 90s, I supported every initiative in order to promote peace. But something happened. Something happened. In 2001, 11 years ago, I don't know how many of you know about the Durban Conference. It was a UN conference against racism and all forms of discrimination and so on.
Excuse me, because of the recording, it's best if you stand behind the table.
Ah, okay, I like to be much closer to the audience, but what can I do?
Thank you.
Anyway, 2001, the Durban Conference. Instead of to talk about peace, about reconciliation, it turned to be a festival of hatred against Israel. And me, as a peace supporter, as a peace activist, I was amazed. I was amazed because I did not understand, and I asked some of my friends from the peace camp, what is going on? What happened over there? How could you participate a festival of hatred that has nothing to do with peace and reconciliation? Let me tell you something. I did not receive good answers, so I had a problem. And it went on because 10 days after the Durban Conference, the 9/11 took place in the United States. So altogether, forced me, in a way, to think, what is going on here? Where is this hatred came from? Because many people, you know, this kind of excuse. People give excuses to the global jihad. And they are saying, look, It's all because of the Middle East. Look, it's because of Israel. Look, it's because of the genocide that Israel is committing against the Palestinians. We will get to it. Genocide that never took place, let me tell you. But we will get to it. But there is a problem, because the 9/11 and the Durban Conference, it happened just after 10 years of peace process, of reconciliation. The atmosphere was positive. And yet, the hatred was behind the scene. And all of a sudden, in the Durban Conference and in the 9/11, you cannot separate, by the way, between the two events, the conference and the biggest terror attack. You cannot separate, because it's coming from the very same kind of source. So it led me to leave my job. I was a lawyer for many years. I was a journalist, but a lawyer. To raise the questions, but not only to raise the question, but also to try to find out the answers. You know, as a journalist, people say about journalists that they are the people who know almost nothing about almost everything. So, let me tell you, I decided to upgrade myself, to be a researcher, to try to find out, not to publish only this kind of slogans and cliches about the Middle East and about the conflict. It's very popular among us journalists. Not only here in Norway, in the whole world. And also in Israel, let me tell you. Because many times when I read my colleagues, my friends, I'm just amazed. Totally baseless. They have no idea what they're talking about. Because it's so easy to sit just next to the computer and to type whatever you want. Wow, what a hero he is writing against the government. It's so popular. So that's why I began my journey to look for the truth. Just with facts. Because my research is dealing with facts. Let's go on. Just for those of you who don't know the background, maybe you do, but many audiences that I give this kind of lecture, they just don't know about basic facts. This is the Ottoman Empire. Before the British Mandate that began immediately after the First World War. And here is the Ottoman map until 1917. Now, if you will look carefully, you will not find a Palestinian state. You will not find even the name Palestine, because the name Palestine, I guess most of you know, was used by Europeans. It was never used by the Arabs, by the Muslims. Palestine was the name that was given by Rome 1,000 years ago. It has nothing to do with Muslims and Arabs. And besides it, P that you can pronounce cannot be pronounced even by Arabs. They don't even say it. So the name Palestine has nothing to do with Arabs or Muslims, but this is a map. Sanjaks. It was distributed, it was shared to districts that were called Sanjaks. No Palestine, no Syria, no Jordan, nothing. This is the map. That's where the story began. Now, the British Mandate was declared 1917. And according to the Balfour Declaration, it was supposed to be, this part was supposed to be the part of the homeland of the Jews. This part includes what we know as Israel, West Bank, Gaza, and Jordan of nowadays. It was declared as the homeland for the Jews. Now, in 1922, there was the first separation. Transjordan was created, not as a state, not yet, and Palestine, a reduced Palestine, a smaller Palestine, much, but it was declared by the British mandate. Again, nothing to do with the Arab world in that time. I'm giving it to you just in order to know the general lines of what we are talking about, and that's what was created in the partition resolution in 47. I'm not going now to all of the history, what happened, the Jewish emigration to Palestine, the Arab emigration to Palestine, and so on. This partition resolution, let us not forget, it was rejected by all the Arab states. There was not Palestine, as so many people think, not you maybe, but so many people around in the world, they think that there was a Palestinian state and Israel occupied the Palestinian state. It just never happened. But I guess you know it. Now, they rejected. There was a war, the independence war. And this is Israel that was created, the ceasefire borders, after the 48, the independence war of Israel. And they declared in that time, we don't want any kind of Palestinian state. The name Palestinian state was not even raised in that time. They were not even considered, the people who were living here, they were not even considered Palestinians. They were Arabs. You will not find one time that they were called in that time as Palestinians. Arabs. They were part of the Arab world. And the leaders many times came from Lebanon, Syria, and other places, because there was not any separation between Palestinians and the other Arabs. Now, let's not forget, for 2 decades, this place, the yellow, it was Israel, and this place was under the control of the Arabs. Egypt and Jordan. Did you hear about a Palestinian state in that time? There was no occupation. It is forgotten, a very simple fact. From one hand, everybody knows it. From the other hand, why? The question is not raised. But in the times that Israel was not occupying anything, how comes that you did not have a state? Israel had nothing to do in that time, between 48 and 67. Nothing. Here it is. It's all yours. What have you done? They have done nothing. Because they never wanted a Palestinian state. It's one more myth that they are fighting for a Palestinian state. No. Wrong. Sorry. You had it. And you never asked for a Palestinian state. Now, this is Israel comparing to the Arab world. Many people don't know. Many people think that Israel is in the sides of, I don't know what, Egypt or Sudan. They don't really understand what is the Arab world, what is the Middle East. Here is Israel. I mean, it's less than something like, when we are talking about lands, about, we will get to it, square kilometers, we are talking about something like 0.0 something. Israel is nothing comparing to the Arab world. I mean, this is your problem? So many times you hear this kind of cliches. Well, the whole problems of the Arab world, it's because of the Israeli occupation. Come on. Come on. I mean, this is, I I mean, you can barely see it. And here is Israel. Well, now you cannot even see Israel, sorry. Comparing to the Muslim world. I mean, you cannot even identify Israel. I mean, you have to look from very close in order to see Israel on the map. I mean, what is it? 0.00000 something. This is the share of Israel in all the Muslim territories that are surrounding the whole area. Nothing to do with Israel. Let me remind you, again and again we hear this kind of cliches that global jihad is because of the Middle East problem. Let me tell you, the Taliban people here in Afghanistan, they have no idea where is Israel on the map. And where is it here in, for example, Nigeria. Yes, Nigeria, for example. Boko Haram, I don't know how many of you heard about the Boko Haram, the jihadist kind of organization that is affiliated with Al-Qaeda. They are killing each other, by the way. They don't even kill. They have no idea what is Israel. But they are part of the global jihad. Or in Somalia, a collapsing state. They have no idea what is Al-Shabaab, the Al-Qaeda organization of Somalia. They have something to do with Israel, with Palestinians, with the Middle East conflict. Nothing, just zero. But yet you hear so many academics and so many journalists repeat this kind of cliche, of lie. Well, it is all connected to Israel. Nothing to do with Israel. But nothing, just nothing. But the point is, and the problem is, that the lie is prevailing. And this is the main problem. The lie is prevailing. And many times it's coming from two sources. Let's not forget it. From the educated people, from academics, from journalists. And I'm talking about lies. I'm not talking about a legitimate criticism against Israel, which many times it is legitimate. I don't have any problem with this kind of legitimate criticism. Let me tell you a secret. Nobody hears us. I do it myself. As a journalist. It's not that I'm supporting everything that the Israeli government is doing. But there is a red line, a very clear red line between lies and criticism. Let's go on. First time that I was shocked, in order to understand what I call the industry of lies. In that time, I did not call it the industry of lies, but later on, I coined the term industry of lies. Now, this is, you don't know him. Maybe one or two Israelis here know the name. Yitzhak Laor, a very known Israeli poet and journalist. You can read him once or two times a week in Haaretz, up to now. A journalist, a poet, and he wrote, gas chambers are not the only way to destroy a nation. It is enough to develop high rates of infant mortality, which means Israel is behaving like the Nazis, but they have new methods how to do it. And you if you ask yourself about the last poll that was published here in Norway, that the Israelis, we will get to it, that the Israelis behave like the Nazis. 38% of the Norwegians think that Israelis behave like to the Palestinians, like the Nazis. You don't have to go to this kind of Goebbels kind of propaganda. Here it's coming from Israel, from an Israeli journalist, from an Israeli poet. Now, for me, it was a kind of, well, I belong. It was published in 2002. After the 9/11 and the Durban Conference, in the London Review of Books, a very prestigious magazine. So I decided it was the beginning of my journey in order to understand what is the story. So I did something very simple. You don't have to be a professor in order to find out what are the real facts. You just go to the website of the World Bank. They publish statistics about everything, almost. Very simple. And I found out the opposite. That since the beginning of the occupation, the infant mortality decreased dramatically. Just the opposite. Facts. World Bank is not a Zionist organization. Is not part of the elders of Zion, you know. It is based on the World WHO, the World Health Organization. They are also not part of the Zionist coalition. Here are the facts. What a contradiction between what an Israeli journalist, a leading Israeli journalist, is publishing and the real facts. It is so simple to go to find out just the facts. And I'll tell you why did it happen. That the infant mortality decreased dramatically because it was connected to the Israeli health system, which is a good one. To those of you who don't know, life expectancy in Israel is one of the highest in the world. It's not, by the way, with all the problems, let me tell you something, it's not so terrible to be an Israeli. We have good life, believe me. A secret, my wife is French, a professor, and she is, academically she is in France, not in Israel, but we spend most time in Israel just because of one reason. It's better. The daily life in Israel, to those of you who don't know, I mean, we speak here about the conflict, about the lies, but the daily life in Israel is much better. The health system is good. Yes, we have problems. We are talking about the problems, but I have to tell you, lives are good, and the Palestinians enjoyed the kind of connection, combination with the Israeli health system. Because in every aspect, they are doing now much better. Oppression, occupation, they are doing much better comparing to any neighboring country. Nobody is talking about the neighboring countries. Nobody is talking about the oppression. I'm not talking now about the Arab Spring, not exactly spring, but comparing to any other countries, they all live much better. I don't want the occupation. I'm not a big supporter of the government. I'm not trying to say that, well, we should continue with it. It's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying it cannot blind our eyes from looking at the real facts, just facts. Let's go on. What people say about Israel. José Saramago, I guess some of you know him. I liked his books very much, and then I found out that he said what is happening in Palestine is a crime as what happened at Auschwitz. Wow. Again, I'm a Nazi, and I never knew that I am. Now, here is someone that is much more familiar to you, I guess. I don't know how to pronounce his name, Justin Gardner. He was, by the way, translated to Hebrew. The Love to Sophie, something like that. I guess you know the book, which I also liked a lot. I mean, I read his book. But he wrote, we call child murderers. We do not recognize the state of Israel to exist. Now, when you say child murderers, there is a meaning in the European culture. Child murderers. Wow, it rings the bell. Child murderers. The Jews again. are killing child. The blood libel is coming again. Now, let's go on with the image that is created. Claire Short, she was a minister in the Tony Blair cabinet, a minister. The oppression of the Palestinian people is the major cause of violence in the world. Remember it. We spoke about it already, but remember it. The major cause of violence. Well, the people that are killed in Iraq and Afghanistan and Pakistan by their own fellow Muslims, they have no idea that it's because of Israel, but now they do. It's because of Israel. I guess it was George Orwell who said once, some ideas are so stupid that you have to be an intellectual in order to express them. So, unfortunately, a generation goes, a generation comes of intellectuals, and they continue. By the way, she also blamed Israel in the global warming. Again, what is the connection between Israel and the global? But we are talking about a minister. We are not talking, I mean, I could take, of course, and I could quote so many other journalists. I'm talking only about leaders, about very prominent people, Nobel Prize winners. I'm not talking about that kind of extreme left or extreme right. Mainstream people, and look what they're saying. Arun Gandhi, the grandson of Mahatma Gandhi, and he said, we have created a culture of violence. Israel and the Jews are the biggest players. And that culture of violence is eventually going to destroy humanity. Now, it's unbelievable because, first of all, it doesn't have many times anti-Zionists, they are telling you, well, we are not talking about Jews, we are talking about Israel. Like if, well, it's allowed to lie about Israel, but we are not talking about Jews. Well, we are not anti-Semites. Now, he does not even pretend to make this kind of distinction because he's saying Jews and Israel. And remember, again, the same kind of motive, to destroy humanity. But to destroy humanity, it was exactly what was the propaganda of Goebbels on his likes in the 30s. Jews are destroying the humanity. And the conclusion was very clear. In that time, he didn't even have to say it. They destroy the humanity. So I'm asking, sorry, I have to ask it much later. Is there a real difference between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism? A question mark. Now, the most quoted journalist from Israel is Gideon Levy. I don't know how many of you know about him. The Israelis know. And you know what? Let me tell you, the Hamas does not need any propaganda department. They don't need, and I mean it, because if they have that law that I mentioned about how Israel is behaving, and they have, from the other hand, Gideon Levy, they don't need any kind of. Just last week, he published an article claiming that Israel is the most racist state on earth. And you cannot even, you know what, you cannot even deal with it anymore. But, the point is that he is the most invited journalist from Israel to so many universities all over. Norway, by the way, too. He is the most invited, and he is going from country to country, from campus to campus, from university to university to say, I love Israel, and because I love Israel, I'm criticizing Israel. He is not criticizing Israel. He is disseminating so many lies. Lies. I'm not talking about criticism. It's not that he's writing, well, Israel should evacuate the settlements. Well, it is legitimate to say you can be in favor of it, you can be against it, but it is legitimate. But we are not talking about it. We are not talking about criticism. We are talking about the same patterns of demonization that the Jews faced so many years ago. The same kind. And, well, the outcome is, for example, Recep Erdogan, the Prime Minister of Turkey, Israel threatening global peace. Again, same kind of impression. And this is the image. I don't know how many of you know about the Muhammad al-Dora story that was, it was found out that it's a big lie. It's called Pallywood. Professor Charles Landis call it from Boston. He calls it, he conducted the research about there's so many lies. He calls it Pallywood, which means Palestinian Hollywood. How they are staging everything in order to show that Israel is a monster. And of course, this kind of, like you can find it in so many demonstrations against Israel. Some polls, it's not only that some intellectuals, leaders, writers are saying. Eventually, you find out in the global polls. In Germany, for example, 50% think that Israel behaved like the Nazis. 68% think that Israel is waging an extermination against the Palestinians. We have to remember it because what I'm going to show you in this lecture, not the next one, that we are talking about lies. I mean, how many Israel really killed? It will be in this part of the... In order to understand how many lies these people disseminate. Italy, again, 40% and 40% behaving like Nazis and waging a war of extermination against Palestinians. Norway, the very just published. Yes, I guess you know it. You just spoke about it. Well, you see, my Norwegian is getting much better because I understood what you said just 10 minutes ago, 20 minutes ago. Yes, according to the new, a new poll of a Peace Institute, I don't know how it's called, but the Center for Studies of the Holocaust and Religious Minorities, yes. 38% of the Norwegians think that Israel behaved to the Palestinians like the Nazis to the Jews. I never heard about a concentration camp in the West Bank or Gaza, but they repeat on saying this kind of lie. But just before, because I'm not going to show you, what happens during the 45 years of occupation. I'm not going because it's a separate presentation. You will have to invite me again. What happened to Palestinians during the occupation? Just one example. I spoke about the infant mortality that decreased. I can speak about life expectancy that increased dramatically. Well, concentration, Nazis. But let me tell you just one thing. You know, when Israel occupied the territories, West Bank and Gaza, it was really like a big concentration camp. And there was not one, check what I'm saying, challenge me, do me a favor. That's what I'm saying, not to you, but I'm saying to so many audiences in places like Berkeley and other places that are hostile to whatever I'm saying. Just check me. When Israel occupied the territories, Gaza, West Bank, there was not one institution of higher education. One. Check me. Now, after 45 years of occupation, terrible, like Nazis, yes? The Palestinians have the highest rate of higher education. 70 institutions of higher education. They are better off in higher education than most of the Europeans. The leading people in the Arab world under the occupation. Nazis, that's what they say about the Israelis. What a gap between the reality and the image. The same is going with the BBC Global Poll, which is published almost every year. Which state has the most negative influence in the world? Israel, again, in the last place in 2002. It improved a little last year. But again, you can find out that Israel is one of the leading states as the most negative, together with Pakistan, North Korea, and Iran. Again, this kind of image is prevailing. The lies are prevailing. And you can see country after country. Unfortunately, in this last poll, we don't have Norway, but we have the last research about Norway, so I will not get. Now, let me tell you just one thing. Before we are going, what is the reality when we are talking about genocide and how many Palestinians or Arabs were killed in all the wars with Israel? Because this is the image. The image is that Israel is conducting a kind of an extermination war against Arabs, against Palestinians. This is the image. But it's not only the polls, it's not only the expressions of so many academics, journalists. If you, each one of you, will go now to Google after this lecture and do something very simple. Put Israel, genocide, Palestinians, 1. And see how many results you receive. And then you will go and put Sudan, genocide, Darfur. I have the answer, but you can have it, each one of you, immediately after this lecture. You will find much more results about the genocide that Israel conducting against the Arabs or Palestinians than the genocide that took place or maybe even taking place in Darfur. Just unbelievable. But if you will go, now this is Google, if you will go to JSTOR, which is an academic website, you will find the same kind of proportions. Now, I wanted to find out what is, because so many people say that Israel is the main source to the problems of the world, to the violence in the world. Israel is the main source, and we hear it again and again, not only in Google, also in public polls, global public polls. What is the truth, and who is killing who? So let me tell you, just we'll go to the bottom line. Generally speaking, from the end of the Second World War, we are talking about 86 million people that were killed. Most of them, of course, China, the cultural war of Mao Zedong, but so many conflicts. Altogether, we are talking about at least 86 million souls, which means, by the way, that after the Second World, just for the information, more people were killed after the Second World War than in the two world wars together. The first one, to those of you who don't know, we are talking about 15 million, 15 million. The second one about 60 million. But now, in the years after the two wars, we are talking about more people that were killed in conflicts than in the two world wars together. But this is not the main point. The main point is to find out what happened in the Muslim and Arab world that is surrounding Israel. We will not go to every conflict. I published a research. You can find it in English. We will go only to the bottom line. Now, it's not easy to conduct this kind of research because you have many sources. You have many sources. I had to limit myself only to reliable sources. Of course, I limited myself only to reliable sources. And when I limited to myself to the reliable sources, I took only the minimal figures, because many times it's in between. In between. Because you don't have a body count monitor like you have now in Iraq, of course, in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. You don't have a body count monitor. So I limited myself. Since the foundation of Israel up to now, we are talking at least about 12 million Muslims and Arabs that were killed mainly by Muslims and Arabs. Remember this number. Now, when we are going to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, we are talking about altogether, since the independence war up to now, we are talking about 60,000 people that were killed. I'm not proud, don't misunderstand me. I'm not proud about one person that was killed, but worse people are killed. Now, if we compare this number to the big number of 12 million, it means that in the Muslim and Arab world, we are talking about 0.5%. The contribution, sorry that I'm using this kind of word, of Israel to the violence in the Muslim and Arab world. 0.5%. But if we compare it globally, we find out that it's something like 0.000 something. But one more thing. When Israel is criticized, sometimes fairly, Israel is not criticized because of what happened in the Independence War or in the Sinai War or in the Six Days War. Israel is criticized because of the occupation against the Palestinians. I mean, 99% of the criticism is because of what is happening with the Palestinians. So let me tell you. According to B'Tselem, which is a left-wing organization, not a right-wing Zionist organization, during all the years of occupation, we are talking about less than 8,000 Palestinians that were killed. Which mean that the contribution of Israel to the violence in the Muslim, in the Arab world, or globally, is statistically something like 0.00000 something. In Germany, just lately, 3 months ago, there was an article about the genocide. Somebody used the term genocide that Israel is conducting against the Palestinians in the last 2 or 3 years. So I sent an article saying that only in the district of Munich, in 1 week, more people were killed than in the last 3 years between Israel and the Palestinians. And they were amazed. So here are the numbers, not of me, of left-wing organizations. So how dare you claim that Israel is waging a genocide against the Palestinians? We are talking about something like, lately in the last 3-4 years, about something like, in some conflicts, once a week, and even less than that. Well, it's happening. Much less than car accidents in Gaza. But how people dare to talk about a genocide? They do. Because, let me say it again, lie is prevailing. Just for the proportion. Well, you know, when we are all slaves of the computers, sometimes they are stuck, but it will be okay, don't worry. It will take, okay, just for the proportion. in Jordan, Black September 1970. We are talking between 10 to 25,000 of Palestinians that were killed in the clashes between King Hussein and the Palestinians, which mean in 1 month much more than in all the occupation, the more than 40 years of occupation of Israel, in 1 month. In Syria, one massacre in Al-Hama, 25,000 people were killed in 1 week by Hafez al-Assad. The father, I'm not even talking about what's happening now. After 1 year of Syrian civilian intifada, we are talking about much more people that were killed than in 45 years of Israeli occupation, just for the proportions. In Bosnia, Bosnian Muslims, in the Srebrenica, we are talking about 8,000. In 1 week, more people than in all the many years of Israeli occupation. But nobody is talking about genocide. The only one place that people are talking about genocide is Israel and the Palestinians. A lie, a blood libel. But the blood libel is prevailing. And I'm telling people, not you, because I guess some of you already are familiar with the proportions. But I'm telling people in Berkeley, in Oxford, refute me, if you can. Show me other numbers. Show me. Maybe I'm wrong. And, of course, they are speechless about this point. When we are talking about numbers, not about images, because they are so strong in images. Let's talk about proportions. Let's talk about numbers. Let's talk about facts. Okay. It was about the genocide. The same is going when we are talking about refugees, because when you are talking today about refugees, many times, refugees of war, I guess most of you are familiar with the word Nakba, refugees, Palestinians, refugees, again and again and again. So I dedicated one of my research to the question of refugees. How long do I have, if anybody from the organizers can tell me?
At least 1 hour from you started.
Yeah, and so which means that I have how much time left?
20 minutes more.
20 minutes, okay. I want to leave, I will now speak something like 10 minutes. I want to have 10 minutes for you to ask questions, to clarify things, and so on. Okay. In the second part, I'm going to talk about the peace process of nowadays, about human rights violations. So I hope I will now just finish the chapter about the refugees, just to know the framework. Okay. I decided to find out the point of refugees because it is the main claim of the Palestinians today and the world. Refugees. Let's solve the problem of refugees and everything will be okay. Okay, let's solve it. Now, I decided to do something very simple. Very simple. Many people were forced out of their homelands because of wars, because of conflicts, because of ethnic cleansing, because of so many reasons. But mainly in order to create nation states, homogeneous nation states. It was the tendency for so many years and so many people. We can like it, we can dislike it, but it was the norm. So many years. But how many people experienced this kind of being forced out from their homelands? Just like the Palestinians. Let's see. if we are talking about, I'm not going to go to details to every conflict, but in the Balkans, it began in 1912 between Greek and Turkey. Population exchange. More than 2 million people were forced out of their homelands in order to create a Muslim and Turkish Turkey, and in order to create a Greek Greece. Finland, Karelia, I guess some of you are much more familiar with the story of Karelia, much more familiar with me. We are talking about more than 500,000 people that were forced out because of the Russian occupation. It was their homeland, and they were forced out. 48, India and Pakistan. We are talking about 14 million people, 7 million from each side. They were forced out of their homelands. I'm not saying that it's good or bad. I'm saying that it was the norm in that time. Cyprus, even much later, we are talking about 250,000 of people that were forced out because of the Turkish invasion to Cyprus. Armenia and Azerbaijan, more than 1 million people were forced out. Nagorno-Karabakh, I don't know how do you pronounce it, but I hope you understand me. Now, sorry. Now, look. I said that it was the norm of that time. So many people said that this will be the solution. One of them was Winston Churchill, who said in 1944, expulsion is the method which will be the most satisfactory and lasting. There will be no mixture of populations to cause endless trouble. Because of the reasons that the First War, the Second War, because of the reasons. He wanted to create nation states. It was, before him, it was, of course, Woodrow Wilson with his 14 principles. And he said, a clean sweep will be made. I'm not alarmed by these transferences. But it's not that he only said, well, it was not only a declaration. After I published my research, a new book, was published only about Europe, only after the Second World War. And we are talking about at least 20 million people that were forced out in Europe in the 40s, after the Second World War, from their homelands. Polish and Ukrainians, and of course ethnic Germans, which is the biggest group. Altogether, we are, before we are talking about the altogether. Yes, and it happened also in the independence war of Israel. It happened. Most of them fled. But some of them, yes, were forced out. Because of the war, because it's happening in every war, unfortunately. Now, 11,000 became refugees. But we tend to forget the other fact. 850,000 Jews, because of the same war, were forced out of Arab countries. So actually what happened in the Israeli-Arab conflict, it was not an Israeli-Palestinian conflict in that time. Let's not forget it. It was not a Palestinian-Israeli conflict. It was an Arab-Israeli conflict. Palestine did not exist in that time. So actually what happened in between Israel and the Arabs, it's just the same like what happened in Europe. It's just the same like what happened in so many other conflicts. Population exchange. People suffered. No doubt about that. I'm not saying that people did not suffer because of what happened. I'm saying that it happened to so many millions. And among them, Arabs from the British Mandate and Jews from the Arab countries. And it was a kind of population exchange. And to those of you who don't know, the Jews who came from Arab countries, they were refugees. All their property was confiscated. They had just nothing. They came just like the refugees who come now to Norway from, I don't know, Somalia, with nothing. Zero. No money, no property, not anything, because everything was confiscated. And they lived in refugee camps, to those of you who don't know. In the 30s, people, so many Israelis, lived in refugee camps. We tend to forget it many times because of only one reason. You know why nobody's talking about them? Because they are not refugees anymore. That's all. Now, altogether, we are talking about 42 million people that became refugees. I'm taking, again, according to my way of working, the minimal numbers. Probably it's much more. Probably it's much more than 50 million people. But I'm limiting in my research. That's what I'm doing. I'm limiting myself to the minimal numbers. My case is strong enough even if I take only the minimal numbers. I don't have to exaggerate. 42 million people became refugees. How many of them are refugees now? Let me tell you. 0. No one is a refugee anymore, except one group. The Palestinians. They are perpetuated as refugees, as an open wound, but nothing to do with Israel, because Israel absorbed a bigger number of refugees. And they are not refugees. And one group from all the nations, not only Jews, only one group is still living as refugees. Now, why did it happen? Because some very kind of formal reasons. The UN has two agencies, UNHCR, that is working everywhere, and the UNRWA, which is dedicated only for the Palestinians. Why do we need two agencies dealing with refugees? Nobody knows. There were some political reasons in that time, 48, 49. But why do we need two agencies? And here is one of the paradoxes. Who is a refugee? According to the UNHCR, you need some objective parameters in order to be a refugee. Not in UNRWA. Everyone who was between 46 to 48 in the British Mandate, he is a refugee. And here is a paradox. In the UNHCR, they help people out of their refugee status. UNRWA is doing the opposite, formally. By the way, formally they are doing the opposite. They help people to preserve their refugee status. In UNHCR, status of refugee is not given to all offspring. It's the opposite, formally, again. In UNRWA, status of refugee is given to all offspring. And one more paradox. Refugee status in UNHCR is dependent on economic condition, not in UNRWA. In UNRWA, you can be Bill Gates and yet be defined as a refugee. And the whole world is paying for it. for this kind of paradox. Because they take so much money from every country, every year. Ask yourself why Norway has to pay for this kind of paradox. And the whole world is paying. Now here is the outcome of the paradox. The UNHCR altogether, not only people who experienced a population exchange, but generally speaking, the UNHCR helped 50 million people. It's according to them, not according to me. Go to their website and they will tell you. 50 million people. They are not refugees anymore. The opposite happened with UNRWA. It all began with 1100,000, and look what we have now. 5 million people. What a paradox. So many times you hear again and again people are talking about, well, Israel should obey the international parameters, the international law. Exactly, you are completely right. That's what I'm saying. Exactly. The point is, the problem is that Israel is singled out many times. That's what I want. Palestinians, Arabs, Israel, they should all be under the same kind of law, the rule of law, the rule of international law. I want to adopt it. You do not adopt it. You, the people who are against Israel. Because you have one standard for Palestinians and another standard to the whole world. I want the same kind of standard. Because, you know why? I don't want the Palestinians to suffer. I'm talking now as a human being. I don't want them to suffer, but they are not suffering because of Israel. They are suffering because of the double standards of the international community. And they are suffering because of their own propaganda. They convince themselves that they are the victims, the internal victims. But let's adopt the international parameters. Let's adopt the international law. It will be good for you. You will not be refugees anymore.